In my politics, I'm very uncompromising, I don't believe in appeasement. With my kids, I was way too much of an appeaser, And then, when you appease, you get terrorism, right? They're wonderful. They're not at all, like you said, in society, they're not like that. But they did a number on me. Yes, they were terrorists towards me, not towards the rest of the world. So I guess that's okay.
Hi, and welcome to the Dayna Show, where we discuss in English day-to-day life of Israeli citizens, our concerns and aspirations for the country, and everything in between. I'm your host, Dayna Kaplan, and we're so glad that you could join us. Before I begin the podcast, I usually mention the hostages, because I feel like, even though we do all these fun things, they're sitting in hell every second. And so I always feel like I have to mention them and say that we're always thinking about them. So that's that. Anyway, Ruthie Blum, it is a privilege for me to have you here today. You are a pillar of journalism, Israeli journalism, and you've been doing this for decades. You work for the Jerusalem Post and for Israel Hayom, and you write articles for the Allgemeiner, for all
Jewish News Syndicate, which I have to plug. Yes.
You wrote a book in 2011, To Hell in a Handbasket,
right? And
now you have a podcast with Mark Regev called Israel Undemocratic. Undiplomatic. Okay, I kept getting this undiplomatic. Yes. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm really happy to be here, especially since you and we used to speak almost every day, and then, life takes over and everything, and it's been such a long time. Also, we both moved different cities, etc., and I'm really happy to be sitting here with you in this beautiful studio, and also to see you.
Yeah, I know, it's a real skirat magal, like how do you say that in English?
It's a closing of a circle.
Closing of a circle to see you here. How have you been?
Oh my God, have I been in the last decade?
What have you been up to in the last decade?
That's a tricky question. That depends if you're talking about philosophically, about life in general, specifically. No, I've been good. I've had, this war has been a whole mixture of emotions, especially since my son and son-in-law both fought in Gaza. And my son had, his unit was ambushed and 3 of his closest friends were killed. And
how did that feel for you, sending your kids off to war?
Well, first of all, I didn't send them off to war. Let's put it this way. He's a reservist. My son, he's now 39 years old. I didn't send him anywhere. He sent himself. Okay. And when they all went to the army, that was because they were inducted into the army. I had no say in the matter. Obviously. I know that Israeli mothers have a say in one case. If you had a family member who was killed in war or, something like that, you could say, I don't want to allow my child to be a combat soldier because I don't want to risk losing his life. Otherwise, I had no say in it. I can just tell you one thing, that on October 7th, I think this might be a good way to start it off, because I've been fine, which is sort of weird when all this tragedy is around us. So October 7th, as it happened, on October 4th, I moved apartments in Tel Aviv from one rental to another one. And I got everything moved in. And then on October 6th, after I had put everything away, I needed some help from my son, who's really good with a drill. And he's very tall, so he also can reach things, including on my ladder. I can't reach all kinds of things, the boy them, and I don't know what. So I had him. It was a Friday, and I said, I need you to come over and help me. So put the last touches, hang pictures, and I don't know, shower curtain, whatever, little last minute things. So he arrives with his big toolbox, and I say, okay, put that there, drill there, hang up there. And he was in my apartment, I would say about 2 or 3 hours or something like that. And then he said, okay, gotta go. And he went to his girlfriend's house. And And that's it. That was a Friday night. And I went to bed early. I was tired from the move. And so I woke up without an alarm clock, even though it was Shabbat morning and it was Simchat Torah holiday. I happened to wake up unusually early. Maybe it was 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And I said, well, I'm wide awake at this ungodly hour. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the beach since my apartment is really very close to the beach in Tel Aviv. So I said, great. I got ready, took a shower, I got dressed, I could get myself all prepared. And then I heard a siren and I thought, is that right? Could that be right? And and then we heard another one or whatever, and I turned on the television, and suddenly it was because we hadn't had rocket attacks in a long time. So at first I thought it was a mistake. A lot of people felt that way. And then suddenly, at that moment, we all realized, it took a little while. We turned on the TV. It was chaos. Nobody really knew. We knew rockets, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, that night, a rocket hit next door to my apartment and all the windows, luckily, and it felt like it hit my building, but it didn't. It's just that I had just moved, the windows all smashed.
You don't have
the whole street. No.
Oh, no.
So in the staircase where you're supposed to stand in a rocket attack is where all the windows exploded. It was very scary. But that morning, just as I was saying, what's going on? And I sort of sending messages to all my kids, my son said, gotta go. He heard those sirens. He immediately left, went to his home, which isn't in Tel Aviv, to get his uniform and get in the car and go down south. Later, I asked him, and my son-in-law did the same thing from another place. They weren't called up yet, you understand.
Oh, wow.
They both, and they're reservists, not young soldiers. They both got in their uniforms and took off down south. Later, I was kind of surprised by this. I said, what, you already got called up? No. And later, I would ask them, how did you know to do that? Because in the course of their driving down south, they were called up or they met up with their units, and they weren't yet in Gaza because we didn't do a ground invasion for another 3 weeks, I think it was. But I said, how did you know to do that? What made you? And he said, oh, because we'd been training for this. And I said, wait, what? You were training for this? How was everybody caught by surprise? Because I said, what do you mean you were training for this? Well, of course, in the Army, if you're in a combat unit, you're training all the time for war. But no. He said he saw the white pickup trucks. I think they saw it on Telegram. A lot of this was on social media. Hamas was already sending pictures and everything. He said the pickup truck, they knew this was an invasion. So this got me very upset. And to this day, now that we're seeing all these reports come out, there's investigations, et cetera. So much was known, and yet, they were looking at it, they knew it, they were training for it, whatever, and were caught by surprise. So, as I said, that was a huge trauma for me and all that. And like everybody, the whole thing is traumatic, and with the hostages still there and the political situation, everything is horrible. But if you want to say on a personal level, I'm feeling very good that in some way I have an outlet for it, because for one thing, I was at the time working at the Prime Minister's office as a speechwriter, and I was there for several months until deciding to go back to journalism, because while I was at the Prime Minister's office, ironically, I couldn't express an opinion, and I thought I would do better for everybody, myself and the government or whatever from outside. And so I do feel better. I have an outlet. I write columns. I do this podcast. And
how many years have you been in Israel?
It's going on 48 years, which is weird since I'm only 20. So how could that be?
Tell me about the kind of family that you grew up in. What was your what was the what's the word again? Oh my God. What was the catalyst for you moving to Israel?
Well, actually, it wasn't my family. Well, it was sort of my family, you could say. It Well, my family, my parents were, well, my mother is no longer alive. My father is still alive. So when I say were, I mean my father is still alive. Intellectuals, writers, editors, etc. And very, very pro-Israel, though I will say, and I've told my father that I intend to reveal this to anybody who's willing to listen.
Okay.
My father always has said, I would die for Israel, but I would rather die than live there. So it didn't come from my father.
Oh, wow.
But I have two older sisters and one of them also died, unfortunately. Both had lived in Israel.
I remember that. Yeah,
right.
so
And
sad.
very sad. Now, my eldest sister had lived in Israel on a kibbutz, and then my other sister she studied at the Hebrew University for 4 years, and so Israel was a part of our, Zionism was in the air.
How old were you when you moved here?
19.
19, okay.
But I came because I had met a guy the year before in the summer, and we said, oh, maybe I'll go and I'll try out Israel. I was at the University of Chicago. I said, I'll go for a year to Israel, to some program at the Hebrew University, and then I'll see. And so that's what I did. But then we broke up before I even got to Israel, so it was irrelevant. But I was already on my way after everyone said to me, are you crazy? You're leaving the University of Chicago to go to Israel for a year. What are you doing? And why are you doing? And all I need to hear is, what the hell are you doing? And I said, I'll show you. Of course, who did I show but myself? But the truth is, I fell in love with Israel really right away, with all the hardship, and there were hard times.
What exactly about Israel did you fall in love
I don't know.
with?
It's hard to remember now when you look back, but I remember little things that sound stupid now. Like, a lot of Jews have said this, especially of my generation, and that's before the internet and all that it was always shocking for American Jews especially, but also other Jews from the West, to come to Israel and see that every level of society is Jewish. So we used to say, really, bus drivers and street cleaners, and everybody's Jewish. So it's not just professors and doctors and lawyers. It's like the grocery guy. Everybody's Jewish. So you'd think, I grew up in New York City. That's very Jewish. It's not as though and I didn't grow up religious or anything like that. So why would I care? And that's a good question. I don't have an answer, but I can also say another stupid thing. It was like, oh, everybody here looks like me with the big hair and noisy and everything. And
so you felt like you fit in.
Yeah, I mean, I went to school with all these girls with straight hair. And I don't know, so when I say it's the stupid things, but I also fell in love with things that I thought were exotic. So a lot of the things that other people hated about Israel, I liked. So just the weird things like going into the supermarket, not understanding how possibly could you use a bag of milk? Like how, if you opened it, nobody told me you need a plastic container for it. So I was in a dorm and the Israeli students hadn't arrived. Yes, I said to another American girl, what are you supposed to do with a bag of milk? You pour a little in your coffee, but then what do you do with the rest of it? And we tried to stand it up. Then we said, no, in the fridge it'll spill. So we took rubber bands and we wrapped it. So we said,
the ceiling.
It wasn't until the Israeli girls came back to the dorms in the fall.
Yeah.
When we saw them walking around with a plastic thing, said, oh, what was it? So at that time, there were just a lot of funny things about Israel, but also it was much more primitive than it is today. I mean, everything just zoomed up and caught up.
Do you remember what politics was like back then?
Oh, it was vicious.
It was vicious?
Menachem Begin had
worse than now?
No, but not better. I mean, people have false nostalgia about this. People always have false nostalgia, but Israelis in particular. Okay, you can hear the left today say, "Oh, you see, Menachem Begin, he had integrity. He had really." When I arrived here, people were saying he's Mussolini, he's Hitler. On the campus, there were students hitting each other with chains. The left and the right. And Likud was like, I mean, it wasn't called Likud then, it was Cherut. It was, but basically the same thing. And Begin was public enemy number one. And there were fist fights on the Hebrew University campus. I couldn't believe my eyes because...
What were they fighting about? What was the highlight then back then?
Well, that a dictatorship had taken over Israel and that this was the worst thing that ever happened because Menachem Begin, how could he... He's a terrorist. I mean, and there was... And then, again, the left was openly socialist. You know what? The country is still socialist, whatever they want to tell you, because what that means is there's not enough competition. And there's, strong unions and everything. And at that time, though, the left thought socialism was good. Now they pretend they always thought that capitalism was good, mainly because they're also rich. Like the leaders of labor and all that, they all live in mansions and all that. But no, but I was shocked because I thought, Israelis, okay, everybody has political arguments, but I thought like Republicans and Democrats in America, that was vicious. And that here, at least we're all Zionists, we're all this. Yeah, right. So I'm just saying one thing is, as the things change, they stay the same. So don't think it was better. And everybody, when people say we need unity, and really, when did Jews ever have unity? Not even, we didn't have it in the Exodus, okay? Leaving Egypt. So it's like, good luck to you people about unity. Forget about it. I'd like to see two Israelis, or human beings, but two Israelis in the same apartment building from the same ethnic background, the same age group, whatever you want, education level, not having a huge blow up over the laundry lines or the parking space. Unity is not the right word, I would say.
It's interesting because after October 7th, I had this weird idea that maybe there wouldn't be a left and a right party anymore, that maybe we would all just join and be on the same side. And then very quickly, you start to see how things start to divide and people start coming up with their commentary on both sides. Tell me how you feel about that. Like about after October 7th, why did people diversify so quickly afterwards?
Well, don't forget, beforehand, there was a huge schism before the war started. Now, we can argue about what caused Hamas to say we were falling apart and think this was a good time to commit the massacre, right? So the left says, or the Kaplan people, whatever you want to call, the protest movement says it's because the Netanyahu government was going to initiate judicial reforms that were going to turn Israel into a dictatorship, which, of course, I thought was nonsense. I'm all for judicial reform. Let's get that. And the others said, no, it's the protesters against it, and they showed Hamas that we're weakened. So however you look at it, forget about it. Hamas didn't need to see us weakened to do this. They also had been planning this. And Israel has always been weak in the Arabs' eyes in the sense that we're so liberal and we care about human life and we have many...
Yeah, they take advantage of that.
There are many reasons. Yeah. And also because we're a democracy, it's much easier if you're a guerrilla group. It's not just Hamas, okay? The Palestinian Authority is like that too. It's that when you care about the rule of law, and however Israelis accuse each other of not caring, it's a lot better than in other countries, certainly in the Middle East, certainly in third world countries. So when you care about that, you care about the law, it would be like saying in New York City, going up against a mugger, okay? So, of course, I'm somebody who cares. I don't go around stabbing people or whatever, but the mugger doesn't care. So we are uneven. It's not like, okay, so now let me just take out my machete.
It's not a fair fight.
No, it never is. When you have a Western democracy fighting in a terrorist group or any other kind of thing. It's just because you can't use their method. You could say, well, you don't want to. You don't want to become like them. Although I have to say, after October 7th, I don't care anymore. I do want to become like them in order to beat them, not in order to become like them.
You can't play the game any other way.
No. So here we are in this catch-22. Why? Because I do care about the hostages. Of course, my feeling really is a little bit like what President Trump said, okay, we got to empty that place out, rebuild it, get them all out of there. I totally agree with that. But what I say is that because we have hostages still in there, we are really stuck because
Our hands are tied.
Our hands are tied because if they don't release them, what we keep saying, okay, we'll shut off your this. Okay, we'll shut off your. They say, we don't care. They don't care if they let all their people starve, die, and Hamas won't be starving, believe me. They are, on the contrary, getting rich on the humanitarian aid and all this stuff. So, but we care so much, including about dead bodies, that they have us, as they say, by the short hairs. And even the most right-wing, even the Knesset members who say that the hostages can't be the first priority, even those, and there's a huge fight over that too, okay? Even those who say that weep with tears of joy when the hostages have come out and been reunited with their families, because nobody here, I don't care what they are accused of, nobody here wants those people dead. It's not their fault they were kidnapped. On the contrary, peacefully, these people were attacked viciously at the Nova Festival and in their homes, and the whole thing is atrocious. And yes, so every one of us wants to save them. So what do? I don't have an answer to that, but I can tell you that if there weren't any hostages, one of the things is to say, get the hostage, at least the live ones, out of there. And then as far as I'm concerned, you carpet bomb the whole place. I don't care if someone thinks that makes me whatever. I don't care, because everybody there, not one righteous Gentile came forth, not one woman, not one child. Nobody said, you know what, there's a hostage in that tunnel or in that house.
And they offered them money.
And they wouldn't even take money for it. And you know what? Yes, they're afraid of Hamas. Let's say that it's not because they love Hamas. They're afraid of Hamas. You know what? Nazi Germany, you think Germans weren't terrified of Nazis? They risked their lives to protect Jews. Not a lot of them. But there were. Here, not a single one.
1%.
So I have no pity on them. And also, I know from our soldiers, I know from personal stories, 10-year-olds aiming an RPG at you when you're in Gaza. He's not a 10-year-old. I don't care. Blow his head off. If he's about to kill you, you've got to kill him first.
Don't you think, though, that Israel knew that this was a possibility? You
Yes.
don't think they had intel and knew that they were building tunnels?
Yes,
and that
they
were
did.
planning? So why were they so surprised?
Well,
Why were we caught
that's
off
the
guard?
million-dollar question. First of all, we knew
Why
they
are
had
we
tunnels.
always in this
10
loop?
years ago, we knew we didn't finish off those tunnels. And again, my son, 10 years earlier, was also in Gaza, like all his friends. They were reservists then. And he was 29, and he was 39.
So why don't we prepare in advance?
Well,
or is it like everything else in this country where they just band-aid everything?
it was a mixture of this, what we call the conceptia, that if you give what the trouble is, and by the way, this is a left-wing position all over the world. Terrorists are because they're desperate, they don't have enough money, and so what we need to do is give them jobs and work permits and everything. Now, it's total bullshit. We have known this. The perpetrators of 9/11, and Bin Laden and all those, they weren't poor. It wasn't desperate. Poor, desperate people actually don't have the wherewithal to go out and do something like that. No. Okay. And by the way, in Gaza, there were tons of villas with Hitler material and all that stuff. And it isn't that we didn't know. We had right hand, left hand. We had the concept. Yeah, first of all, that Hamas is deterred. Hamas is not interested in actually in escalation. Then we had specifically heads of our security services who were saying, no, they've pulled this stunt before. We know it was like the boy who cried wolf, No, we've seen them do those exercises near the border. We know, no. And then it actually happened. They said, okay, but it's happened many times before when they didn't perpetrate October 7th. So my answer to that is, too bad. I don't care how many times they cry wolf. That's your job. Then there was the belief that all our technology on the border was going to be our defense line of defense. And it wasn't. Because guess what? A few little terrorists shot at the at the technology, and then they used a little Lego tractor to break through
Tell me, what's the story here?
I
Why
don't-
do they always have to wait for something to? It's a common theme in this country. They always wait for a disaster and then work on fixing it. It's everything: traffic lights,
everything.
smatim,
Everything.
anything in bureaucracy,
Everything.
any kind of
Everything.
process. Until there's a huge F up, they don't even work on fixing it. They're waiting for something to happen. How many times are we going to go through this loop? And with the hostage deal also, it's like you sound like an asshole when you say that you're against it. But the truth is that the more we keep going in this loop with them, they take hostages, then we have to get them out. And so we can't perform the way that we need to. And so it just keeps going on and on. When is it going to end? When?
Well, here's the thing. I think that so many people here on both sides of the spectrum were guilty of this blindness, and you say it's an Israeli thing, but we did used to think that's one area in which we excelled. You know what I mean?
know.
So this was a big, that was part of the trauma. It wasn't just that all these, 1,300 people dead, 250 people kidnapped, rapes, beheading. That was trauma. But the other trauma was we thought we were protected.
Exactly.
That is the bigger picture.
Yes.
So the trouble here is that you have different. I've heard Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, say when in the beginning of the war, early on, he was saying, we already knew Hamas was ISIS, 10 years ago in 2014. So I said, he shouldn't be saying that, because if you knew that then, where the hell have you been, right? So the answer the answer is true. It's a truthful answer, and I know he's right, but the question is, should we have cared? The answer is, no way 10 years ago, if we had done what we are now doing in Gaza, destroying all the buildings, killing a lot of people, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had any legitimacy, not in the Israeli public and not in the international community. As it was, we hardly had legitimacy to do what we were doing. They said we're committing war crimes and all that. So that's true, but I think our big problem is that even when we follow everybody else's rules, right, the internet, we did everything they said. First of all, we first were a bunch of dead Jews, and that was enough to give us 5 minutes, 4 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of legitimacy to go to war. And before Biden started to say, don't do this, and the International Criminal Court and the UN and everybody's condemning us. But my argument is, well, they're going to condemn you anyway. So you might as well do what needs to be done.
But this is the way it's always been.
Always been. So exactly. And it's always been that way with the Jewish people, and it's always been that way with democracies too. It's not just Israel, but Israel it's like a twofer. Okay, because we're not just a democracy, but we're a country full of Jews and all that, who, I would ask you, how could countries like America and Canada have experienced this explosion of anti-Semitism, open anti-Semitism, the likes of which we have not seen since the Holocaust, where after the slaughter of all these Jews, as opposed to, well, now we really better keep our anti-Semitism under wraps, given what just happened. On the contrary, what happened? How do you explain that?
Because we have horrible narrative here. We don't know how to represent ourselves. I think that the other side is just either they're more in numbers, or they're winning in social media for sure. They overpower. I don't know why there's not enough Jewish people, Jewish leaders in Chutz La'aretz, in Canada, North America, who are standing up. You don't see that. You see here, but Po V'Sham, you see there's an influencer or some kind of advocate or whatever. That's not enough. Where are all the rabbis or heads of congregations or people like that standing up? They're afraid.
Wait, some of them maybe are afraid. Many of them are signing those vile letters about how Israel should watch it. Listen, my brother's synagogue in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York, At some point, it said, we're not going to recite anymore the prayer for the IDF soldiers, something like that. So he left the synagogue.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not
During
kidding
this
you.
period?
Yeah. Let me tell you.
Oh, dear.
Let me tell you something. The rabbis sometimes are the worst. I know what you're saying. Where are the Jewish leaders?
Yeah.
But let me tell you, the Jewish leaders who have been standing up are accused of being right-wing, fascist, crazy. See, so I think the organized Jewish community has a real illness. Not all of it, of course not. But as you know, for example, in the United States, you know very well, in Canada it's true too, and in England it's true. The Jews don't vote for the conservatives. The Jews don't vote for the right-wing party. And it's true that once upon a time, decades and decades ago, Jews were, it made sense for Jews in America to be, for Jews to be Democrats or Labor Party and all that, because the right wing was more, let's say was the richer party, was the more anti-Semitic one. That hasn't been true for decades, okay? The right wing now is much less anti-Semitic than, and not just anti-Semitic. I'm talking about having those same values and all this. And so you can see Trump won by a lot in this election, but not the Jews. And
even though he's doing so much to fight anti-Semitism, help Israel.
Exactly. The Jews have, it's for them. I told this to some Israelis, we don't get it. And I think you would understand this too, because when you come from abroad, you know how you have friends of all different kind of levels of whether they keep kosher or not. And some don't really keep kosher, but they'll say, yeah, but I'll never eat pork. Okay. It's not because you say, yeah, but you eat cheeseburgers or whatever. I know, but not pork or not bread on Passover. Well, for them, the Republican in America, it's like saying it's pork. It doesn't matter. I know Trump is he's a special case, et cetera, but forget about that for a minute. Even when you name them another Republican, it's like, that's all well and good, but that's pork and I won't eat it. There is no rationale, because I could say to you, why? That's not rational. If you don't keep kosher, what difference does it make if it's pork or it's shrimp or it's whatever else you're not allowed to do? And it doesn't matter. It's emotional. It is, because pork is the symbol of what you're not allowed, what's taboo. For most Jews, conservative politics and, as I say, the Republican Party, or in Canada, it's like pork. And there's no getting around it. And it doesn't matter. Also because Jews, I'll tell you, American Jews, they're so much more concerned with partial birth abortion and don't take away our abortions and our pronouns, while their fellow countrymen are being slaughtered. But they're still worried about that.
They're the same parties, people that are in the universities who are wreaking all this havoc right now.
All right.
And they still support it?
Oh, yeah. It's an amazing thing.
Wow,
It's incredible. It's incredible. And from people you wouldn't expect. Or they'll say, yeah, we care about Israel, but the Republicans are going to take away our human rights, which is nonsense. But never mind, that's a separate argument. Yeah, I can tell you it's nonsense, and you could say, no, it's not nonsense. But look at Canada is a great example. Canada is exploding. And Justin Trudeau, look, I'm saying people like that still, even if they're not happy with him as a prime minister, you'll find that Jews they're not going to vote conservative. Now, maybe more will now.
Not necessarily though in Toronto. Toronto has a big conservative following, a huge conservative following.
But even so, if you counted the numbers, not just from Toronto, from the whole country. No,
Yeah.
I get it. More Jews voted for Trump in America this time than previously. But still, it's still not in overwhelming numbers. It's still not. And in England, the same thing. Fewer Jews gave money to the Democratic Party. You could feel a shift because of October 7th, but not really, not the kind you would expect. So when you say the organized Jewish community, I don't know, I'll tell you, any of the really conservative or right-wing, it depends on where you are and what you want to call it, a right-wing Jews are considered, they're also considered like pork. I mean, they're shouted down at, meetings of the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, Mort Klein, the Zionist Organization of America. He's a fanatic and everything. And notice, by the way, all the people, and this is true of the Israeli Knesset members too, all the people who have been warning for years about these very things that you're saying, and we have to do this, and this is going on under our noses. To this day, they're still being called out by the rest of the world and Israelis as fanatics and as right-wing crazies and as... Now, does that seem right to you? Does that seem fair that those are the ones being vilified? Maybe somebody should say, whoa, they were right? No.
For example, the Pinoi from Gush Katif, right?
Exactly.
I mean, people thought, I was handing out their orange bracelets and everything.
Yeah.
I was very against the Pinoi.
Me too.
Everybody knew that we all knew and foresaw what was going to happen in the future. People still think it was wrong. People are still against that idea. People still think that I'm an extremist.
I know.
But
I know.
It's not, for me, it's like, I'm not a political person. I'm sorry to say it in front of you and any other listeners. Since October 7, I think a lot more people have started to open their ears to hear about what's going on, because like we said before, all of a sudden they realize government's not doing the good job. They're not protecting us. That's what they're there for. I have to work. I have to pay my bills. I don't have time to do that and also worry about what the safety and the security of our country. Right? Has your politics changed at all?
I've been right wing, I think, my whole adult life, or whenever the time I came of age, when I didn't understand a lot about politics, but even as a young girl, I already started to hate left-wing politics because at the time we didn't call them woke, but that's what it was. Because in my circle, the school I went to and the people in my milieu, let's say, were already full of what I considered complete nonsense. And they also were always saying everything's racist. And then there was the radical feminists and men are bad. And there was all this liberalism towards crime, like it's our fault that you got mugged on the subway because we're white privilege and it's our fault, and Jewish landlords against black tenants. And at a young age, I already was against that stuff without being sophisticated or knowing enough about it. It was the way I would say, what? And it drove me crazy with all the limousine liberals. The only blacks they ever saw were wearing a uniform and serving them their dinner, right? Whereas I lived in a neighborhood that was full of blacks and Hispanics we didn't have little butlers and everything. And they didn't know what they were talking about, and also I never thought it was racist to recognize ethnicity or ethnic differences, and I didn't think it was sexist to recognize gender differences. Okay, I thought that was just, and then in Israel too, I really did notice the left here was very racist. And what do I mean by that? When I moved to Israel, I was very shocked to discover that the left was openly, first of all, they couldn't stand anybody from North African countries. So it was all the Ashkenazi, elites. But even if they weren't elite, one of the things they did, they were very snobby about anybody who had Moroccan heritage, Iraqi heritage, whatever. So we're all Jews. I thought we're all Jews. No. No, those are second-class Jews. Then I was even more shocked to discover the way they talked about Arabs. And, it is like a distinction between Jabotinsky and Chaim Weizmann. That Chaim Weizmann was like, okay, we have to, the Arabs in the land of Israel and Palestine, we're gonna help them. We're gonna give them, medical treatment, and then they'll like us. Then we won't have a problem. And Jabotinsky said, no, they have a real culture. They're there. They're gonna hate us. We have to go in with an iron fist, show them who's boss, and then we can get along. And to this day, look at the difference. And when I moved to Israel, again, it was 77, and I had people at the university openly saying things like, well, we really have to separate from the Palestinians because they have lice. I was like, what? Students at the Hebrew University who were on the left saying that. I couldn't believe they would. And then they said things like, and the terrible things they said about anybody who wasn't Ashkenazi. And so I said, yeah, these are the same leftists as in America. It's all very like let's, everybody's a racist, but no black can move into my neighborhood or something, the hypocrisy of that. And it's gotten to the point where I'm just sick of it already with this. Everybody's a racist and a sexist and a blah, blah, blah. No, there is such a thing also as having common sense. And one of the troubles here that you say, why do we keep doing that? Because we keep looking at the world in a way. Listen, how can anybody today, you can decide this is it. Netanyahu's the prime minister. He has been many years. He has a government that was in charge on October 7th. So they've got to go. Okay, let's say you decide that. For that, there are elections, whenever they are. They're either going to be in a year and a half when they're supposed to be, or a year and 3 months when they're supposed to be, or they'll happen when the government, if the government falls, right? One or the other. Good, so you can vote them out. But the people who who really screwed up on October 7th are appointed. They're not elected. And Israelis the left is always obfuscating the difference between elected officials and appointed ones. And all our army generals, all the head of the army, the head of the Shin Bet, the head of the Mossad, the head of the police, all of these people, these are not elected. We elected the Knesset. We elected the government. For good and bad.
Do you like Bibi?
And, well, it depends what you mean. Like him personally.
Have you ever met Bibi?
Of course.
Yeah?
Oh, I worked at his office. Yeah. Yeah, I've met him. I also met him way before.
What's he like in real life?
Look, it's hard to say because when he's at office, it's not what I call real life. I met him many years ago.
Sweatpants and a t-shirt, right?
No.
Just kidding.
No. He's, well,
I think he likes his job. Do you think he wants to stay in his job?
Yeah, I think, I'll tell you what I think. I think that a lot of people accuse him of not caring about anything except power and his seat, right? They say he doesn't care about the hostage, which is baloney. Okay, he doesn't care about this, he doesn't care about that. All he ever cared about was his seat. And he's willing to do anything or to sell the country down. Now, I say, no, first of all, I don't think that's true. Well, it is true. I want my politicians to care about their seat because then they have to care what I think. Because if they don't do what I want, I'm not going to vote for them anymore. For example, on the Likud list, I vote in the Likud primaries, okay, on the Likud list. I will never, again, if he's still on that list, put Yoav Gallant in my top choices. Again, forget it, okay? That's how you do it. You say, he displeased me, he went against my politics, I'm not voting for him. I don't feel that way, but now, Netanyahu, yeah, that's right, you asked me. I think it's in a way worse. The real reason Netanyahu does what he does and won't exit politics is for a far worse reason than that he only cares about power and his seat, okay? And what is worse or better? But I think worse you'll see what I mean, maybe in a biblical sense worse. I think Bibi believes that it's his calling and that he's really the only person who can save Israel and the Jewish people. That's why I say it's worse. Why do I say it's worse? I mean, being a politician who cares about his seat, like, oh, ho-hum, that's what a politician is. And again, as I said, in a democracy, you want him to care, to hold on to his seat so that he does what you want. But to imagine that you're the only person that can save a country, that is worse than just being a politician. On the other hand, it is not. That's why I disagree with the people who say that about him, that he doesn't care about anything.
Who else would take over his position? Who's better for the job than him?
I don't see anybody today who is. But you know what? People said that about Ben Gurion. There are great leaders. They don't come along all the. It's like a teacher. They say you once, twice in a lifetime, or 3 times, maybe if you're lucky, you get a teacher who made a difference in your life and your childhood. All right. But does that mean there's no other teachers? Maybe not all were terrible, but there's like 1 or 2 who are, okay, that's like leaders. You're not going to always have Winston Churchill. You're not going to always have whoever leader you consider great. And any leader who is great, you say, let's talk about King David and his flaws. There is no such thing as a great leader without flaws. But as I said, it depends how you look on this. I don't think that Bibi is in it for the things he's accused of being in it for. And why I say it's worse is that maybe worse is not the right word. But when I say worse, what I mean is no, he actually believes that he needs to save Israel. And
is he saving Israel?
Well, that's a good question, because he certainly didn't. No. And I'll tell you where I think, actually I spoke of this on my podcast with Mark today, because I think his biggest flaw, his biggest weakness, if you want to say, because I don't think he's corrupt, and I think his trials are completely bogus, and all of the things he's accused of, I don't agree with at all. Okay, I do have criticisms of him, but none of that stuff.
Okay.
I think that he has been way too weak and hesitant about firing people, and that's throughout his career. We have a deep state here. He acknowledges it. We've had, which is a bunch of unelected civil servants running the show, undermining the government. Menachem Begin made the mistake of not getting rid of that when he took over, and he left everybody in place to undermine him. But he doesn't fight the unions. It's like the internal stuff. And then no matter what's going on, I think he should have, there are so many people I think he should have fired by now, and he didn't. His weakness, I think he's not afraid of Iranian missiles. I think he knows, he has his eye on the ball about the Middle East and alliances. He knows how to fight. He knows this. But not against a teachers union, or not against people saying our cottage cheese is too expensive. Then he freaks out. And then that's why he allowed, also the war started, but he allowed the judicial reform to be taken over and fail, and why he didn't fire the head of the Shin Bet and the head of the army. Herzli Halevi, our chief of staff of the army, shouldn't be there. Okay, right, the war started, etc. But again, I'm just saying there were people, and our attorney general, whoa, he should have fired her from the get-go. And he won't. So I'm saying, okay, you can fight the Ayatollahs, but you can't go up against that moron Gali Baharav Miara. It concerns me, yes.
Do you think that Bibi's hands are tied from the point of view of our dependence on the United States? Because I kind of feel like no matter what happens in this country, before we take any action, we need the approval world opinion or United States, and we don't do anything without their thumbs up. Do you think that Israel has a possibility, a chance to become independent from the United States?
Probably not entirely, because I don't think anybody in the world can be totally independent of a superpower. Anybody?
Yeah, but when it comes to, let's say, October 7th, do you think that the delay in us fighting back?
No, we had to, because we didn't have enough weapons.
Was the delay because we needed the approval?
Oh, you mean in the ground invasion?
Yes,
the first delay?
Yes.
No, the first delay wasn't. I think now, in retrospect, what I understood at the time from my son and everything was, they were getting the troops ready. They were drilling near the border. They were in south. They were actually making their plan now how to do the ground invasion. And so they were getting the troops ready. They were already making plans, et cetera, how to best do it, especially since, again, there were all these hostages in there. Don't forget, this wasn't a usual war with a ground invasion. They had to plan how they were going to do this and whether to go from the south or the north. But you're right. We need less dependence on the United States. Now, luckily,
do we have a chance of doing that? Do you think
well,
that
I know we started to say we started to manufacture way more defensive weaponry and stuff at home to avoid that situation where somebody can say, okay, you're not getting the weapons you purchased from us. So, but whether we could be entirely independent, I find it hard to believe because, as I said, there is no country on this planet right now that's not dependent either on America or on China or on, I mean, it's the way things work. And Israel is such a tiny country. So you're right. We have to pray that a friendly administration is in Washington, as is happening now, as opposed to then. But we do need to develop way more independence, because you never know.
It's always been this way.
Oh, it has. But I'm just saying, we're not the only country. That's the way the world works. You can't. It's always been that way. But also, we didn't have enough resources, and we didn't have enough. Look, we don't have bunker busters, for example, to hit the Iranian nuclear sites. We don't possess. Those are. I'm no military expert, so forget about it. I know we just got a whole bunch of bunker busters, but I don't think those are for that. Those are for the tunnels. Maybe I'm wrong or whatever. Point being, if we don't have them yet and we don't have the capability of building them, then we have to have them from America. Yeah.
I want to talk for a second about the hostage deal.
Right.
It really frustrates me to talk about it. Why do we have to wait so much time to go in and get them? Can we not get them? Can we not get them on our own?
Well, let me ask you a question. How did we not get Gilad Shalit 5 years, one guy sitting 300 meters from the Israeli border? I want to ask you that. How? One guy, not 250 spread out in various tunnels. I don't understand. So the answer was, yeah, but we weren't in Gaza, now we are. Now, one of the answers to what you're saying has to do with the pressure from, look what happened every time we went, what Hamas then, the other psychological warfare they're playing is they say, you see, whenever we hear the soldiers coming to do a rescue operation, we or what they claim is that actually an Israeli airstrike killed this and that and the other. We should have been able to, but it's not the Entebbe raid anymore. I guess I don't get it either. I think we're all frustrated.
Do you think we have the capability of doing it if we wanted to? I thought our army was much better than it is. I feel bad saying Lashon Hara.
No, not without killing a lot of, I'll tell you something.
No matter what, there's going to be death. No matter what.
No, of course.
In any situation now.
Listen,
and it's our fault. It's our fault. We should have been way more prepared. It's our fault. Not just on October 7th, but the security of the country should be paramount to everything else.
That's right. But you see, what happens, I am with you on that. And I also think that we should have taken bigger risks. And then the answer to me is, oh, really? And what if your kid was a hostage in Gaza? So I say, here's my answer. Listen. That's a stupid argument. Okay, so first of all, I'm allowed to talk because I had a kid fighting in Gaza to look for the hostages, and he almost got killed. So it's true, thank God, he wasn't, right? But don't tell me I don't have the right to express an opinion. Also, if my child were a hostage in Gaza, it is possible that I'd say, you know what? Give up the whole country. I don't care. Give me my kid back, including if everybody else is killed, including if the other hostage. It's possible I'd feel that way. So I'm a mother. I'm not making policy based on that. That's why
it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Of course it shouldn't.
And the reason that it's happening and it is going to continue to happen is because we don't put a stop to it.
But let me tell you something. The kibbutzim in the south, and again, you can start and go, it depends where you start counting on the irresponsibility. Because it goes back, as you said, disengagement, but then it's before that and before that and before that. And I think the Oslo Accords was the worst, and Palestinian Authority is terrible, But here's the thing that also is unpleasant to talk about. The border communities, the kibbutzim, for the most part, they were all gung-ho to get the settlers out of Gush Katif. Why? Because they said, oh, those religious settlers with their shmatas on their heads, and they hated them. Why should Israel waste resources on defending those religious Jews?
Wow.
They wanted them out. Okay, so then they got out. Now you're on the border. Now, does that mean I would want them to get slaughtered? Of course not. But they began to help all the Gazans, take them to hospitals, say peace, 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 peace. So when you say we're at fault, now I'm not blaming the people for getting slaughtered and raped. if you are helping a Gazan and then he goes and slaughters your family, no, you're not to blame. He is. But the question is, have you changed your mind frame? A lot of those people still say that Netanyahu is responsible and not Hamas. I mean, they're angry at Hamas. But let's face it. So here, and I'll tell you something. One guy from a kibbutz in the south, a left-wing kibbutz, gave an interview recently. And you know what he said? Mm-hmm. He said, it's lucky that we were attacked and not in Judea and Samaria, because I can tell you from having once been in this position, we would have thought if it were a bunch of Orthodox Jews who had been raped and murdered and kidnapped, we would have said it's their fault for living where they live and because they're mean to the Palestinians. He said, luckily it was this. And a lot of us said under our breath, thank God it was a bunch of girls in bikinis smoking dope at the Nova Festival. And I say that, not, it sounds terrible to say that. I say, thank God, because then you can actually see, they don't care if you're Orthodox or you're smoking.
It's crazy that it took that for people to open their eyes.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. And that's something that the right has been knowing forever.
Well, you knew that from the Holocaust. Did the Nazis care whether you were a good German and you listened to Wagner and you had little patent leather shoes and you were the perfect German? No. If you were a Jew, you were just like the guy with payas. We knew that already, and we know it. It doesn't matter. But so when you ask me, but here's the trouble. I have to say, that's a Jewish disease, but it was, listen, when Moses was leading the Jews out of Egypt, half of them said, oh, let's go back there. This is, he went to go get the 10 Commandments, and then that's what I say, then they go pray to the burning bush. These ones want to go back to Egypt. The Jews it's always like, we have that problem. It's not just Israelis. Okay, it's not just Israelis.
Yeah, I know.
And so are we going to solve it? I don't know. I don't see how exactly, because can you change that mentality?
It's our destiny.
But then there are some people, I know people studying Kabbalah and stuff who say, Jewish mysticism, not Orthodox Jews. Some say this, but I'm talking about mysticism, saying, you know how they say we're the light unto the nations, we're supposed to be the light unto the nations, that we always miss the point of that. And that what it really means, and one reason that God, how we say, God, could you, we're chosen people, could you choose somebody else for a change? But that the message is, until you learn that message, you're going to keep getting punished, not by God, not that God came down and sent the Nazis to kill you, but that if you don't realize that you are superior in goodness, not superior in goodness, and believe it,
and values,
and fight for it, and values, and show the world, the barbarians, the way, then you're going to constantly be killed. Because, instead of showing them the way, we say, oh, well, they didn't mean it. Oh, well, maybe it's because we're so privileged and they're so underprivileged. Maybe it's our fault. No, that's not showing the way. Okay, that's not showing the way. So you could believe in mysticism or not, and I don't have the solution, but I know that my views are always considered very extreme right-wing, because I do believe in living by the sword when you are surrounded by enemies who make no bones about their plans, and then they carry them out. And I think that the Palestinian Authority is just as bad as Hamas. It pays for terrorists. They are terrorists. We're fighting also in Jenin. We have to. And I really think that we have to stop with the nonsense. And every time you hear the word peace, you know you're about to be killed. Get the word peace out of here, all right? The peace accord, peace. Listen, the Abraham Accords, that was good. That was great. We have we call it normalization. There was actually
Do you think
both sides.
It could come back? Do you think that they could make it happen?
Maybe. I mean, again, they're waiting to see if we don't if we're the weak or the strong horse, again, they say, we thought Israel was strong and now they're, okay. But what I'm saying is even this word, like we're going to have a peace process or have lasting peace. Forget that. How about we are going to show people who's boss, and then they won't dare kill us. And then if they don't dare kill us, we can have trade, or we can have tourism, or whatever you want to call it, okay? Get the word peace out of the way. All you see, when I see the word peace, I see blood dripping down, okay?
How much time do you devote to this, to journalism, editing, all of this stuff during the week? Is this a daily thing?
No, it's a full-time job. I have a full-time job. Yeah, I have to write several columns.
How has it affected you personally that you're immersed in all this
crap? Yeah, well, it's awful. I mean, it's sometimes really depressing. And I say, because I have friends who say, I'm sorry, I just won't read the news and I won't watch TV and all that stuff. I said, I can't not.
I know. It's a luxury to turn it off.
Yeah, sometimes very, makes me ill. On the other hand, I'm kind of addicted to it, to knowing what's going on. And so, on the other hand, you want to know something? I know. You also like personal stories. I'll tell you what I do late at night when all the news channels are finally over. There's now reruns of the news. I finish watching channel 14, then I switch to channel 15, and then I've on my phone, and so who said what, right?
You sew?
No. I watch Chatunami, which is but for anyone who might not know Chatunami, Marriage at First Sight in the Hebrew version. I watch Ahava Chadasha, which is another show. It's like where women live in an apartment and then they have men come and they see if they can become a couple with them. And what's the third one? There's a third one. Oh, Love is Blind. And that's on Netflix. So you might find me at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning binge watching crap like you wouldn't believe, and all about this kind of stuff when I've now finished writing about watching.
I totally get it because I'm exactly the same way. I won't watch, when I want to, for leisure, I won't watch anything with violence. I won't watch anything that has to do with rape or even action films. It has to be the most stupid, ridiculous thing ever that can't remind me about the hell that we're in right now. It has to be a total
all I want to know is, did this one hook up with that one? Did it work? Are they still a couple today?
What's your life like?
Non-existent. Thank you very much.
Good.
Well, it depends what you call a love life. Okay. No, it's non-existent. In some ways, you might say that it never really existed, what you would call a love life, because that's that word, you know.
You have had relationships.
Oh, many. I've had 2 marriages, and I've had many, many relationships.
American men or Israeli men?
Both. I would say, I don't know which one. I would say probably more Israeli men. I was married most of all of my children are from my Israeli husband, and I would say probably more Israeli men than American men.
What do you think the difference is between dating Israeli men and American men? Or it doesn't have to be American.
Well, you know what? It's hard to answer that because the American men here, or British or Australian or Canadian or whatever, they're already living here. So they've already become partly Israeli. They're not Israeli, but the way I'm Israeli, after living here decades and decades and raising your kids in Hebrew, you can't really be counted as someone from another country in the same way.
Do you feel Israeli?
Yeah, I don't know if I feel...
Do you identify more with American or Israeli?
Well, I think probably Israeli, although I work in English because I only write in English and I do most of my... I interview on television mostly in English, less in Hebrew. So you could say, on the one hand, I live more of an English-speaking life, but I I don't know the difference. You know, I can't remember if let's say my kids, I could have an hour-long conversation with my kids, and if someone or my family in America says, well, were you speaking in Hebrew or English? I can't remember because it's like the same. Or if I fall asleep and the television is on, I couldn't tell you what language was being on because it all sounds, I understand it. So I don't know if I feel more American. I think probably by now Israel. I'm in Israel many more years than than I was in America.
Right now, me too.
Right, and I didn't really do anything in America. I mean, I got my driver's license in Israel. I paid taxes in Israel. I don't know. Had jobs, children. All my children are born in Israel. My grandchildren are born in Israel.
Do you have any regrets living here?
No, because not regrets living here. Regrets the way anybody has about regrets in life. It's funny that people always ask that question about people who live in Israel. So imagine if you go to Canada and you see people and they say, do you have any regrets living here? Do you love living in Canada? I don't know. When I'm happy, what do you mean? It's where I live.
Well, listen,
it's
life. Different because you've moved from a different country.
That's true.
Right? So you have something to compare it to. A lot of people don't. They're born in a certain area and that's where they've always lived.
That's true. But you know what? My grandmother, she was from Galicia, however Israelis say. She came to America when she was, I believe, about 18 or something like that. Okay, and she spent the rest of her life in America until she was in her 90s, and so periodically, when she was pissed off or unhappy or whatever was going on that she didn't like, she would say, I should have stayed in Europe, right? My father would say to her, Mom, you would have been killed by Hitler if you'd stayed. And she's, he wouldn't have gotten me. So again, going back to when we say her fantasy, where exactly would you go back to live in Europe? She didn't mean on the Champs-Élysées, right? I mean, so what I mean is, it's that, like we were saying, nostalgia. She was pissed off, so she's going, you see, maybe I should have stayed in Europe. Now, that's a funny, considering also, it wasn't like she had any money or anything where she grew up. It wasn't like I had some Jews actually were very wealthy, and then, no, she wasn't. So I'm saying whatever she was imagining would have been a better life was not true. So I don't really have that. I don't have that. Like, if I had been in America, I would have. Because let me tell you something, Dayna, you know this. You take yourself wherever you go. You could put me in America, put me in Antarctica, okay? I'm taking me wherever I go. And whatever screw-ups or whatever issues, I take them with me, okay? They don't disappear when I go on an airplane.
And also, I think that when people make Aliyah, maybe people who are older think about this more than people who move here when they're younger. But it's like you're moving here and you're not looking back. It's like you're coming here, you're making a huge effort to move here, you're putting your roots down here. That's it, right? So in terms of regrets, a lot of people don't think about regrets. They're all in and they're going to deal with whatever comes to them, right?
Right.
So it's like that's the way that I feel. I used to, when I moved here, I think for the first 5 years, I would go back to Canada to visit all the time. And I would bring back duffel bags full of all my favorite toiletries and all the things that I missed. And then after a while, I was like, this is your home. This is where you live. Deal with what you have here,
Yeah.
And that's the way it was. And that's the way it is.
But also, if you have kids, I think also, once you have kids somewhere, it's like, well, it's true. One of my kids decided to move to America because he went to study there and he stayed, although he's Israeli. But if you have kids somewhere, it was like, oh, you mean no. Okay, so first I picked up and left my parents and siblings. Right? Now I'm going to pick up and leave my kids. I was like, come on. I mean, first of all, I don't want to.
How did you feel about it that he left?
Well, I didn't mind that he left because he went to study and everything. And I was a little sad when he stayed, though his reasons they made perfect sense. In that, financially and all kinds of reasons that he said he prefers living there. I mean, it makes it harder. See, if you're not rich, you can't just get on a plane, go see this kid, then come back. And so he hasn't seen his siblings in a long time. He was supposed to come, then the war, his tickets got canceled. So it's like, I thought, oh my God, it was bad enough. I moved away from my family and I had to have my babies without my parents here and all that.
That was hard.
Right. But now I have my son there. So when he starts having babies and I won't, it's like, so all I can say is it would be nice to be like, just to have frequent flyer miles enough for the rest of my life. And then it wouldn't be so difficult because distance is, it's hard to get on a plane maybe for 12 hours. But the fact is, that's the thing that makes it hard if your family lives far away, is that you can't just see them when you want to.
And it would break my heart if any of my kids left. Mm-hmm. I know my boys for sure wouldn't leave. And up until recently, I thought my daughter was also, pretty secure in her life here in Israel. But recently she's expressing to me that she's like, Mom, we could have a life without the fear of being killed. We don't have to be in a country where we have a fear of war and sirens and piguim and terrorist attacks. Wouldn't that be nice to live in a place like that? And I say to her, you're trading one thing, but nothing's perfect. It's not like you're going to go back and go to Canada or North America and your life is going to be rosy.
Also, you could just get pushed into the subway tracks in New York or get bashed over the head in Canada at a university in Canada. What I mean is
there a statistic of how many people get killed from piguim, from terrorist attacks here versus how many people get killed?
I'm sure you could look it up. It's a little hard to track because it depends in what period of time and everything. But I can tell you this weird thing about me. First of all, when you live with dangers, they're the dangers you know. And I remember when my kids were much younger, and there was a lot of buses blowing up in Jerusalem, and Americans would say, how can you live? Oh my God, and how can you live there? Which made sense. It was dangerous and all that. But then I was going on a trip with my kids to visit my family in America, and Israelis said to me, be careful, they kidnap babies in shopping malls. Watch your kids, they steal them in shopping malls. Yeah. So I was saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the fear is here, what danger's there. So then I got all nervous about, I'm going in a shopping mall. They're going to steal my children.
What do you do to stay sane, Ruthie?
I don't do it. I'm not sane.
Besides watching Love is Blind.
That doesn't exactly keep me sane, but I'm not exactly sane. What do I do?
Do you have any other hobbies, things that you like to do?
I don't usually have time for it because between work and then sometimes helping or seeing my kids or helping babysit or doing something like that, it's sort of like, I wouldn't say, if I tell you what my hobby is, it won't sound like much of a hobby though. I mean, other than Wordle, but that, takes 5 minutes every morning. I do that every morning, but how long does that? No, I would say, I like going to cafes, meeting my friends at cafes. That's what I love doing. Or for drinks or something. And I can't always do it because you have to have the same schedule. But if there's anything I would call a hobby, that's what I like taking my laptop to a cafe to work, that's why I like living in Tel Aviv. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I like that too. I like it a lot. I wanted to ask you, if you weren't doing journalism, what other job would you want to do?
Well, when I was really young, and I'd say, well, I don't know. No, just anything. Just throw it out there. Would you really, your fantasy would be? It was to be a nightclub singer, like lying on a piano. A singer is what I wanted to be, yeah.
Do you have a good singing voice?
Well, not anymore because of all the cigarettes I smoked. But I did have a good singing voice.
A huge smoker.
I did have a good. Well, I sang in choirs and stuff. I mean, not professionally.
What kind of music do you like?
I like all kinds of music, but mainly I like rhythm and blues. I also like very melodic music. I never like punk rock. I don't like metallic. I don't like, for example, I never liked later era Beatles. I only like the earlier. I like
Easy listening?
Yeah, I like melodic songs, and I love, like Aretha Franklin and Diana Ross, old,
Any Israeli
old
singers
stuff.
that you like?
Yeah, there are. I like a few of them. It also depends on the songs and everything. I like a lot of Israeli music. But again, it depends. Like I like Shlomo Artzi, and I like certain bands that, and the thing is that I used to know a lot better all of the stuff that's the music now. That's why I'm naming old songs from America too, is that I used to drive and I would hear the music on the radio all the time, right. Or when my kids were growing up, they were listening to their music. And now, no music. I'm not in a car, I don't have a car, and if I am listening on my phone with headphones, it's to the news or podcasts about the news. It's
you're really immersed in this crap, aren't you?
All day long, really.
Do you love it? Do you love it?
Love is like the word peace.
Yes.
Do I love it? No, I find, no, I would prefer, something, let's put it this way. I would prefer to be lying on the beach with a drink out of a coconut with a little umbrella sticking out of it, having no cares in the world. And even if those cares were the politics and now we're listening to it for fun, or if I were reading something, not in order to edit it and make it better, or not in order to know what I'm going to write, but just for pleasure. Okay? I haven't done that in a really long time. Or I used to read novels. I like English literature. No, I can't. So, and it reminds me of who was this who said this? Benjamin Disraeli said, every time I sit down to read a novel, I write one instead. Now, I can't say that about myself. I wish that were the case. But it is true that every time I sit down to read or do anything like that, it's got to be my homework, not my pleasure. So I can't say I love it. No. No.
What's your favorite thing about living in this country?
Israelis. I think Israel is so sexy. It's so sexy. You go out in the street, and by the way, when you turn off the TV and you actually go out onto the street, and I don't care who's what, you don't feel all that hostility. You do if you go to a demonstration, right? You walk around, you go to the grocery store, you go to the doctor, you go here. Now, some people are rude, some aren't rude. It's like, but everybody, it feels like family, or it feels like you can,
yeah, it's like when you watch the news, it brings about a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
But then when you go outside your door, you don't feel it anymore.
Nope.
It's life as usual. It's actually quite amazing how even after azakot, after sirens, like I freeze. I'm still at that stage where I freeze. I say to myself, I'm not used to it. But a second later, you look out the window and traffic is bustling and people are honking and people are still getting into arguments. So you're saying your favorite part of Israel
are
Israelis.
Which is
because there's
a lot of people who, yes, I think it's very sexy. The whole place is very vibrant and everything. I'll tell you something, it's funny, my hairdresser told me when Iran attacked us, that really massive missile attack, but I was caught outside, by the way. I was lying on the sidewalk every 5 minutes because the bus driver made us get off. It was really scary. My hairdresser told me that, all these women were in there getting their hair done and everything. And then there were warnings ahead of it, start being near your bomb shelter.
Yes. We had like a 2-hour window.
Right, but I was out of the city and I hadn't realized that it was whatever. And then I got caught in it.
Okay.
So, but he was in his hair salon. And when it started being closer and closer, he said to everybody, okay, we got to go to the shelter. And so a couple of the girls who were getting their hair done, they were scared because they lived alone. I mean, they were roommates or something, but they didn't want to be alone. So anyway, it ended up where the hairdresser and his boyfriend were together with a whole bunch of suddenly they ended up being a bunch of them together. And when the attack happened, it took for about an hour. You had to be completely in the bomb shelter. And then when it was all over, maybe it was more than an hour, I don't remember, but for a while, And then was all over, and nobody wanted to go back home because they were feeling upset or nervous. So they all had a potluck dinner. And they said, these two girls are roommates who were at the hairdresser. He's with his boyfriend in the apartment. Then the other neighbors come up, and everybody's like, oh, I've got some of this. And they were making omelets and pizza.
Say what you want about Israelis, but they're the most resilient, strong people you're ever going to meet. I don't know, like I said this on another podcast, I don't know if it's like psychopathic, if they're crazy, or they're just really, really strong. But it's very admirable and it's inspiring, because like I said, I fall apart. But these people, they just take the next step. They just go with the beat,
And having one another, having that, like what I just described, it helps because it's like, well, then you can also support one another, but also then you can kind of make fun of it. Look at it. Oh, who's got pizza? Who's got bread? Who's got, let's make dinner.
Like when you see pictures on all the different social medias of people in their mamadim or where they were in sirens, being in Tel Aviv without a mamad looks a lot more fun than sitting in the bomb shelter by yourself. Everyone's out in their pajamas or half naked, and it's a great time to meet people and hang out.
Well, exactly. But also,
unfortunately,
that's another funny thing about Israelis, because my daughter and I were talking about when the Houthis were attacking, and my daughter's neighborhood was always getting sirens over from the Houthis from Yemen. But one of the things we used to say, okay, tonight sleep in your bra. Because you end up with a bunch of men somewhere in a bomb shelter. In her case, it was like family members and religious guys and everything. And she once ended up, it was like in a T-shirt and underpants, because she had to run with her two little babies to the shelter. And then she's there half naked with all these guys. But we all said that. We all said that either because you don't want to be naked or you don't want to look like an old lady with no bra on. And one of the things we always said is tonight sleep in your bra. That was we know that the Houthis are going to get, or Hezbollah or something, right?
Yeah.
Because it's embarrassing. And one guy said to me, I don't know, we like it if you don't come in your bra. We said, no, not old ladies. Okay, yeah. Maybe young ladies with perky boobs, you like that. That's not, but I mean, that's the kind of thing we talk about. Maybe other countries being bombed do that too. I don't know, but I know this was an ongoing conversation. Like, and also we'd plan our showers. Do you remember that? We'd say, okay, usually there's going to be a rocket attack around 9 p.m. They wait till around, so it's like, oh no, if I take a shower now, you don't want to get caught in the shower with a siren because that's scary. And you grab your towel and then what? You're standing, and then there was all that planning. And one night after that Iran attack, I got home. I had been lying on the sidewalk, on the filthy sidewalk, several times, getting off the bus, getting on the bus, getting off the sirens and missiles. And we saw them in the sky and all that and the interceptions. So I get home. Finally, it was all over, right? And I was feeling drained and terrified. And it was over. And I got home and I was filthy, right? I took off my clothes to but I was afraid to take a shower. Even though I really needed a shower, it's true, I took off my dirty clothes, but I was afraid to take a shower because I said, I know they finished, but what if they didn't?
Yeah.
I'm not getting in the shower now, And a friend of mine said, no, you should take a shower because if you've been lying on the sidewalk, my hands, I said, well, I washed my hands and I changed my clothes, but I was afraid to get in the shower.
I know, Zahava, my daughter and I, we would be like, should we go to sleep now? Because they've been sending sirens at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Do we have enough time to sleep? Is it worth going to sleep now? Should we just stay up? That was
exactly.
Part of the psychological warfare.
Exactly.
Also, it's like we're expecting them, and then there's no siren that night, but everyone's still up because they're waiting for it. It was crazy.
And also, all these people with young children, think about this. Okay, so luckily they made it on time. Nobody was hurt or injured, right? But you know what it's like having two little kids and they're finally asleep. And then the sirens go and then you run to the shelter and you come back and then they don't go to sleep. And then you be up the rest of the night because they can't go back to sleep. You know what it's like trying to get your baby
also
to sleep.
Elderly people.
Oh, right.
I have the same thing with my mother. I was in Yerushalayim one night and there was a siren. And I had to wake her up and it was hard to get her up. And then she had to get dressed and then we had to go on to this. It was a huge deal. It was a really huge deal. Do you think the government pays attention to the
To that side of life,
to the inochut of what's going of what we're experiencing here?
Well, I'll tell you how we know they do. I mean, the government is made up of people. The people in the government all have people in fighting in Gaza. In fact, one of the cabinet ministers, his son was killed during the war. We have, and then his nephew was also killed. And then now, it's not just that. Our previous defense minister, he even tells a story that on October 7th, he heard about his defense minister, but of course the chief of staff of the army, as I said, didn't call him up. His daughter calls him up and says, Abba, there are sirens in Tel Aviv. That was on October 7th at 6:30 in the morning. He said, oh, now everybody in this country has someone in the army, is a hostage, is married to a hostage, is married to someone in the army, has little kids, has grandchildren, has nephews. It's impossible not to know. If you were a member of Knesset or government, there are women in the Knesset who just finished breastfeeding, themselves. There is no such thing in a country the size of not knowing this stuff. You're right. Maybe Netanyahu at the moment, he's not. He's protected. There's a siren and he's already, so he doesn't know or whatever.
But they hit his house in Caesarea, right?
Right. But again, he wasn't there. But as I said, everyone around him, everyone's talking about it. My daughter gave birth in a siren in the hospital. Luckily, she was in a safe area in the middle of labor and all that. But as I said, there is no way you couldn't know. So they know, but
You know what I feel is lacking? Maybe I'm just naive, but I felt like after October 7th, when Bibi was addressing the country, I felt like I wanted to hear from him that everything was going to be okay. I wanted to have a little bit of comfort in knowing that, we're going through this, but we have a plan. I feel like there's been no support for the people, of all that we're going through in this country. We don't know, there's a lack of communication.
Well, funny, I didn't really see it that way. What I did see is that every time he did say it, he got attacked by his detractors. But we had every night, we had the IDF spokesman on TV every night saying, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, this is what we'll keep you informed,
yeah, but
whatever.
I wanted to hear that everything is going to be okay. I wanted to hear that we have this under control.
Right, but
that
you know what?
A plan.
Look, we did say we had a plan. To say, if anybody had told us we have this under control and it's going to be okay, I would have been annoyed that it's bullshit only because it depends when you mean. It wasn't all going to be okay, although Netanyahu said, okay, this is what we're doing. We're at war. And he said on October, we're at war and we're doing this and we're doing that. And he did. And the spokesman said, and people were rallying around, okay, now we've got to do this. And then he announced when the ground invasion, he didn't want to announce yet because we had to have some minimum element of surprise, which was already not okay. We couldn't, but not exactly when all the troops were going in. It was sort of a gradual thing.
Right, so I kind of felt that maybe that was the reason that there was a little bit of a distance because they have to keep a little bit of privacy. We want to feel like maybe they know what they're doing. But then you see how things unfolded, and especially when I hear on social media now about the hostage families, how they haven't even met with the hostage families.
Well, a lot of them have. It also depends, a lot of their hostage. Yes, and so has Sarah, and many of them have thanked him. Listen, there's a lot of, maybe he hasn't met with as many. It's hard to say. There are hostage families who say that he's got blood on his hands. There are hostage families who say he's completely responsible for everything. He even said in the Knesset the other day, or yesterday, when was it yesterday? I can't remember which day it was. He said, the more hostages I've managed to get out of there, the more you attack me for not doing anything. And he's right.
They shouldn't have been in the first place.
No, we know that. But now they're saying he's not doing enough to get them out. And I say, really? He signed that horrible ceasefire deal to get them out. And he did. And another 3 and another this and some dead bodies. I mean, okay, those are human beings and we need them out. But to say he wasn't doing enough, he's been the whole time doing. And by the way, it was Hamas wasn't. And so forget it. I mean, they shouldn't have been in there in the first place. But okay, that ship sailed already. But again, everything we're doing and everything the hostage families want us to do, guarantee the next hostage taking. Just so you should know, guarantees it. Because it works. It works. All you got to do, grab an Israeli. Could be 1, it could be 250.
How do we prevent that from happening again?
Look, the only way you could prevent that from happening would be to do something we will never do. And that is let them all die or kill them ourselves or never have
that
released.
That also wouldn't even solve the problem.
Or have killed Gilad Shalit or said we don't care about him. Never release any prisoners from Israeli jails. Get all the Palestinians out of jails. Bomb the buses once they're out. There's something you can do, and by saying sorry, you can steal you can kidnap anybody you want. We're not going to do what you want, okay? No Israeli, including not me, we're not going to do it. We don't want to do it. We're not going to be animals like that. We're not. But what I'm saying is, at least acknowledge that everything we're doing guarantees the next time. Again, unless, the whole world sees it. Everyone knows. You know something interesting? Without getting into an argument over Ukraine and Russia, because I don't want to do that. I'm all Ukraine, Russia'd out already. Okay?
I'm sure.
But I want to just make one point. Ukrainian President Zelensky said, and he said it when he was talking to Trump in the Oval Office, do you realize that Russia has kidnapped 200 Ukrainian children? Okay? Have you heard anybody mention this? Do you hear Ukrainians saying, stop the war, get the hostages, give Russia anything it wants so we can get the hostages? No, wait, am I saying we should do that? No, I'm just saying, notice the double standard when anything happens. You haven't heard that. Have you heard Ukrainians say, no, listen, 200 children kidnapped by Russia? That should be, why is that not the headline of everything? And why are Ukrainians don't want to end the war? They don't want Russia taking over. They don't want that. Okay, now, you could say they're right, they're wrong. I'm not getting into that. Has anybody said you've got to give humanitarian aid to Russia? Russia invaded you. But the hostage thing, they're not holding, they just kidnapped them. They're probably giving them to Russian families, whatever reason. Why aren't Ukrainians saying, end the war now, we've got to get back those kids? And why is nobody talking about it? You know why? Because we're Jews and it's the Jewish state and everything is our fault and everything we do wrong is our fault. Whether we do it right, it's not good. Whether we did, because what was our fault about not knowing about October 7th is we were being too nice. We were being too nice to the Arabs. We were being too nice to the Gazans, the kibbutznikim. We were being too nice to them. They let them in their homes and they mapped out where they lived and how many children they had, what dog they had. And we were too nice. We were too accepting. We believed in peace, which was a lie. We believed in the Oslo. We believed in land for peace and this for peace. So that's what's wrong with us. But then how about somebody saying, wow, you Israelis, or how about Israelis saying, you know what, we're such good people. That's a problem. Maybe we have to stop being such nice people. No, that's not what we say. We say we're bad and it's our fault. Ukrainians aren't saying that.
I wanted to ask you a question about the different news channels in Israel. Okay, because I have Arutz 12 on my TV only because it comes with my TV, and I actually prefer it visually as opposed to Arutz 14, even though that I'm right and I'm not left. I don't like Arutz 14 because I feel like there's always this argument that goes on, and I can't hear what anyone's saying. They're always arguing with each other. But what I've noticed, and it took a conversation with my nephew, who's also been in Gaza since most of the war, when I started to have this rhetoric of everything is the government's fault. And he says, he like, didn't slap me, but he's like, do you hear what you're saying? He's like, do you know how much work we've actually done? Do you know how many people have sacrificed their lives? And then I started to realize that the left, they really sneak it in there about how the government is responsible for every bad thing that happens.
Exactly.
And they never accentuate the positive things that are going on. Do you notice that also?
Oh, of course. I totally noticed that. And I know, no, absolutely. And Channel 12, I watch because I want to know what they're saying, although I watch each of the channels for different programs and everything. But you're right. And they brainwash you in a way that you're not even aware of, even when you don't agree with it. Because it's not like they're just saying it. It's like, oh. And I have friends who call me up and they say, yeah, well, of course. It's like this.
You can say the truth and
I
slant
say,
it
really?
in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's
I say, I have to tell you, I'll say to her, really? Where did you get that? I know where you got it. You've been watching Channel 12. Look, the point is that there's an agenda. Now, it's okay. It's perfectly okay to have a political agenda if you're a news organization, especially a private one.
Yeah, that's where they get their funding.
That's fine. No, it's fine. You can have commercials. People who don't like you don't have to watch. It's fine. And you can be a right-wing channel or a left-wing channel. What I don't like is when it's the government channel. My taxes are paying for Channel 11 and for Galei Tzahal, the army radio. And excuse me, I don't need to pay you to feed me your left-wing garbage. You want to spew it, it's your right to do so. But how dare you make me pay for it when it's a public channel?
Good point.
Don't do it to me. You go and do whatever you want. And I feel this way about everything about freedom of speech. Just don't make me pay for it. I don't like it. I don't want to pay. Yet, those same people want to shut down Channel 14. They tried for a long time to shut down Israel Hayom newspaper until Israel Hayom newspaper turned against Netanyahu. And now they're fine with that. Okay. My point is, you don't like Channel 14, don't watch it. You don't like Channel 12, don't watch it. Or do watch it, or don't. As long as I don't have to pay for a public service channel that is, and there used to be also, government-funded newspapers and everything. No. We don't need government-funded anything in the media. We have social media galore. We have streaming services. Today, the news is not, you don't need anymore. It's like, you don't need to turn on Fox and CNN. You got it on your phone. Everything, news is accessible. So that's why I get very upset with it. And I know why your son said that. Exactly. You know, how many, and also it used to get very resentful.
No, he was like, the enemy is Hamas.
Exactly.
It's not the government.
Exactly.
It's not that, yes, the government screwed up in a lot of ways, but they're not putting the blame where it's supposed to be.
Exactly. Let me tell you, exactly. And as I said, there are flaws in what we're doing. But don't tell me I got very, very angry when certain hostage families being hijacked, by the protest movement. Not all of them. Some of them are naturally left-wing and against it.
That's so unfortunate. That is
And they were hijacked. But to hear them say, and he's not doing anything, and he doesn't care. I said, excuse me, my son is risking his life every day, day in, day out. He risked his business too, which ended up having to close, by the way. That's another thing. Excuse me, looking for the hostage. And so he should. And he did it willingly, voluntarily, and everything. And all you guys can scream about is who's not doing it, and the Haredim are not going to the army, and the Haredim is like, you know what, give me a break. You know how many left-wing friends I have whose sons didn't go to the army? How dare you? Let's do, something, that's right, the Haredim, you can say that. You want to get into that fight, fine. I don't care. Why don't I care? Well, why don't you care? Your son spent all those days in reserves. And I said, really? If I cared, what about all the years that all my friends at the cafes, their sons did not go to the army? They either left the country, they went to Berlin, or they went to art school or this school or that, or they said, sorry, I can't, I'll have a breakdown. They didn't serve for whatever reason. Do I blame them? No. If they're not going to serve, if they don't want to, they aren't.
And they shouldn't.
But don't give me that business and don't tell me we're not doing anything. All right? Don't tell me that. And that is with the government, and that is what the army is doing, and that is whatever. And so I was angry a lot of the times at the people that you weren't allowed to be angry with.
What advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now about your journey in journalism in Israel? Do you think you would change anything?
It's hard to say, but there's one thing I would have told my younger self, that my younger self would have been disgusted if I had said it at the time. Marry somebody rich. If you don't, and all my friends who got that advice, I always got the advice from my parents.
Marry for love?
No, they didn't even say marry for love. Marry someone who has the same worldview. Marry someone who's your best friend. Marry someone who cares about the same things. Now, I had friends whose mother said, marry someone with money. Now, the reason I would give that advice is that if you stay married, then great. Okay, then you have, and you work or you don't work, but you have money and you can raise your kids. I just had this fantasy of raising a lot of kids and having a husband who would support me while I did that. And then I could get down on the floor and I'd be baking cakes with them and all that and not saying, oh my God, I have a deadline and I don't have any money. Okay. But if you stay married, great. Then you have money to enable you to do what you want to do with your kids. And if you get divorced, at least whatever half you're taking, there's a lot left of it. So either way, you can, you're not, in addition to all of the other problems. That's what I would have told my younger self. But my younger self would have said, ugh, that's a disgusting thing to say. She would have said that to me.
I agree with you.
I
agree, for sure.
So it wouldn't have helped if I could go back and tell my younger self. She would have said, what has become of you?
What about navigating your journey in journalism? Would you have made any changes?
I don't know. I don't really think of it so much as, it's a good question. Partly because I grew up in a family of writers.
Right.
So, and I always thought, I'm not going...
Does it bother you when people talk to you about who your parents were?
No.
Do they mention it? Do you want to mention who your parents are?
Well, I can, but it isn't... my father's Norman Podhoretz, and my mother was a Midget-Dector, and my brother's John Podhoretz. No, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm sure there was an influence, like if my father had been a brain surgeon, maybe I would have gone to medical school because that would have seemed, you never know, there's nurture and nature. And I kind of fell into it. And I fell into it because that's all I know how to do. It was like, I know how to write or I know how to edit, but not so much
Is that
because
what your parents wanted you to do, or they didn't?
No,
say
no. I think my parents, who never told me that I needed money, I think and they never had any money. No, they never said that I married for money. Or no, they never would have said, oh my God, they would have died before no way. Okay. But I think they would have been really happy if I had married someone with a lot of money, or if I had, made a lot of money. They would have probably been really proud, and so I don't know. I think they were also secretly proud of me that I lived in Israel. Because my mother liked Israel. As I said, my father said he would rather die than live here. My mother didn't feel that way, but she never lived here. She would visit and stuff. That's all. I don't know. What do you tell your younger self? It's hard. Because again, it's one of those what ifs. As I said, my younger self wouldn't have listened. So it's irrelevant.
At least you know yourself. You know your younger self.
She would have laughed me out of town.
Totally. You and I met during your last marriage, right?
Right.
You haven't been married since then.
Right.
And I have to tell you that since that point, you've always been a role model for me. Because from the outside, I know you say you don't make money, but you've always looked like you had a successful career, something that you really like to do. You were divorced and you were raising your kids on your own. And I was a newly divorced woman. So I always looked up at you and I said, she could do it. She can follow her passion. and still maintain her family and take care of her family. I hope that one day that I could be like that also.
I'm really honored that you feel that way. I'm glad, because you know something? It's very nice to hear from the outside, someone looking in, who says,
you.
wow, you did this thing and you did this. No, it is nice to hear, because usually about oneself, we feel like, you're not doing enough, or I wasn't good enough mother with my children, or I wasn't good enough, or whatever it is, not good enough. But also, it's not as though your children walk around saying, wow, great job, Mom, right? And certainly your ex-husbands never said, wow, great job. Because if they had been the type to say, great job, I probably wouldn't be divorced either time. Neither time, okay?
Yeah.
So it's not as though I was surrounded by people saying, great job. It was more like, really? You didn't buy an apartment? Really? You don't have, or you live in there? Really? Whatever. You don't hear, wow, you're really something.
Are you proud of looking back? Are you proud of yourself now for what you?
Sometimes, no. It depends on the day, how much vodka I've had to drink.
Are you a big drinker?
Not a bit. I used to be. No, now I can't drink as much. Maybe because I'm getting too old. I don't know. No, I don't drink a lot.
Okay.
But I mean, you can get into a mood where you say, hey, wow, I did that. That's pretty cool. And you can get into a mood and say to yourself,
when I see my kids, not necessarily at home, but when I see the way they interact with other people, that gives me a lot of naches. That gives me a lot of pride. Then I feel like you did a good job,
right?
Because it was really, really hard, and they didn't have a lot of advantages. But to see them flourish, and the way that they're respectful and polite, and they're good people, that makes me feel like I did a good job.
Oh, and it should. Yeah.
It's really hard
when I see the two of my kids who have their own children, they are much better parents than I was. And I watch it. I'm in awe of them. No, really. So I say, partly it's either they learned something from me, but also if they didn't, let's say they are like this because they're saying, I'm not going to be like her, I'm going to be better. It's also good. Because they really are, they're patient with their kids, no matter how tired they are, no matter how busy they are. They're patient, they're firm but loving. I'm going to tell you something. My kids, like if, the popsicle broke and they would have a tantrum, I'd buy them another popsicle, okay? Yeah, I admit it, okay? I was like, they used to say, listen, if you're going to say yes to your kids, say it right away. Don't say no, and after they throw a fit, then say yes, right? So it was like, I was always in that, or just go to bed already and I'll clean up the Legos. No, and instead of saying, no, let's put them away, you put them away, and you teach them how to do it and all that. I'd say, I'll get them to bed, I'll finish this, and then I'll clean up the whole house. I think
that's a big issue for single parents,
I was like, just let them go to sleep. I'll clean up the living room in 5 minutes. If they have to do it, I'm going to be up another 2 hours. Forget about it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's always a conflict because on one hand, you want them to learn boundaries.
That's right.
On the other hand, you need your sleep. You need your alone time.
Exactly. So, but I watch my kids and they're very good about it. Or like I'm at their house and it's towards the end of the day and I'm helping out and I start to pick up toys and then my son will say, Hima, don't. He's doing it. Or my daughter will say, no, don't pick that up. So, okay.
And the kids are like, we want to go to Savta's house.
Exactly. And I say, come on, Savta, there are different rules, all right? But they're very...
What's it like to be a grandma?
Oh, it's very...
What do they call you? They call you Savta?
No, they call me, Savta Ruthie is what they call me.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. That's so nice.
Yes, because they have other Savta, so they have to differentiate between one Savta and the other. Yeah.
Of course.
And I'm saying I was much too wussy. In my politics, I'm very uncompromising, very I don't believe in appeasement. With my kids, I was way too much of an appeaser. And then, when you appease, you get terrorism, right? They're wonderful. They're not at all, like you said, in society, they're not like that. But they did a number on me. Yes, they were terrorists towards me, not towards the rest of the world. So I guess that's okay.
What's it like being a savta?
Well, it's great.
What's it like seeing your children have children?
Yes, it's weird. I mean, at this point, I guess I'm used to it, yeah. One of the weird things about it, I think, is that... I don't feel myself growing older. So it's not that I feel
amazing,
different.
by the way.
No, well, thank you.
You look exactly the same.
But I mean, so I say, I now have 4 grandchildren of different ages. And I look at them and I think, it's so weird to me. I said to my daughter, it's just to show you that she was talking about a meeting she had, or it was family day and they were bringing the kids or whatever. And then I said, and so... the manager did this, and I referred to a manager, and she said, Ima, I'm the manager. So I said, how did a 5-year-old get to be a manager? Because it's like, we both cracked up. It's like, I can't get it through my head that she's a grown-up, and she has children of her own, and it's like, I don't know what decade I'm in.
Yeah.
I
can
so it's like, really? Yeah, that part feels funny, not having the grandchildren and playing with them or having them.
Seeing your kids in that role.
Yeah, or and I see them in that role and I see they're really great at it, but somehow I forgot that my daughter also, has a master's degree and has a big job. And I mean, it's like, I know it intellectually, but.
That's amazing.
Isn't that weird though?
Yeah,
it's funny.
It is, but it's wonderful. We need more generations in this country now. We need to start plugging away, getting.
Well, we do have a high birth rate. Israel has the highest in the Western world of birth rate.
Is that because of the Arabs?
No. It's also Jews, and it's also not just religious. Secular Israelis have a higher birth rate than secular Americans and stuff. Really, I know. Think about people just anecdotally. I know people who are, everyone I know, even my left-wing friends, single friends, not friends, gay friends, everybody has kids, and sometimes 3 kids. And I know a secular woman with 7 kids and one with 6 kids. And they're not religious, all right? And it's funny with gay couples. As I said, every gay couple I know also, that's their aim is children. And I remember that some Americans thought that this was like the new, Israelis want children. Now that could be changing because we see that also marriage age is going up. Israelis used to get married very, very young, and now it's older like the rest of the Western world. But the business of having children, so that I think more people are having children out of wedlock or through sperm banks or other methods, but the idea of having children is still very strong here. Well, yeah, don't you? That's what you can see it around you.
I do. I don't see secular people having as many children, and I think now because there's a lot of males who have been killed, I think that people are stepping up their game a little bit, but I still feel like we need to have more in our generation.
I think we will. I think we will, though.
I hope we will.
Well, listen, if Jewish women around the world would stop making abortion their priority, maybe we would.
Good point.
Not that Jewish women have more abortions than other women. I wasn't even saying that. That's why it makes it so ridiculous to me. Yeah. It's like, that's your issue? Why don't you pick an issue that's actually relevant to you,
100%. Anyway, Ruthie, thank you so much for coming here today. It was really, really a pleasure to see you again. And I wish you a lot of success in the future.
Total pleasure to see you. And I'm sure it won't be the last time, and not just for a podcast.
Yes.
For coffee or vodka.
Right. Yeah, invite me to Tel Aviv. I can't wait to come hang out.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for inviting me. It was great.
Pleasure. Come back again soon.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Dayna Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the podcast, like and share with your friends on social media, and rate us 5 stars. Don't forget to tune in next week, and we'll see you then.